Good afternoon. This is the Commission's annual hearing with respect to the budget of the Electric Universal Services Program, which is provided oversight by the Public Service Commission but is administered by the Office of Home Energy Programs in the Maryland Department of Human Services Office. The purpose of this program, as many of you know, is to help low-income residential consumers reduce and manage their utility costs by creating affordable payment plans. Today at the table, it looks like we have representatives from the OHEP as well as OPC and Staff Council. I recognize, are there other parties that wish to participate today? Mr. Wallace? And, okay, if you could just make an appearance at the podium, Mr. Wallace. And
Good afternoon, Chairman Commissioners. Eric Wallace here on behalf of the Retail Energy Supply Association.
thank you. We'll call you up at the appropriate time.
Hi, Christy Ravenel for Baltimore Gas and Electric.
Thank you, Ms. Ravenel.
Good afternoon, Matthew Seegers for Pepco and Delmarva Power.
Thank you, Mr. Seegers.
Good afternoon, Laurel Pelletier, Citizen Advocate.
Thank you, Ms. Peltier. Why don't we begin with a representative from the Department of Human Services. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Stanek, members of the Commission. My name is Bill Freeman. I'm with the Office of Home Energy Programs within the Department of Human Services. Happy to be here today to discuss the EUSP proposed operations plan for 2020, fiscal year 2020. I'd like to thank the Commissioners and Public Service Commission staff for their support and guidance throughout the year. I also want to thank our local administering agencies, our utility partners, advocates, and the customers who do the heavy lifting, provide invaluable feedback and insights, and support OHEP in our efforts to make sure that Marylanders in need are connected to home energy. As you know, the Department of Human Services, through the Office of Home Energy Programs, is responsible for administering the Electric Universal Service Program, or EUSP, and the Maryland Energy Assistance Program, or MEAP. The goal of EUSP is to help make electric bills more affordable to low-income families. There are two components of the program: bill payment assistance and electric arrearage retirement assistance. EUSP bill assistance is funded by electric ratepayers, and the electric arrearage retirement assistance program, as proposed in our plan, as well as any additional need for bill assistance, is funded through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, by way of the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund. The goal of MEAP is primarily to help make heating bills affordable to low-income families. MEAP provides benefits for all types of heating, including electric, gas, propane, oil, kerosene, coal, and wood. The last fiscal year saw the launch of the Gas Arrearage Retirement Assistance Program funded through MEAP. MEAP is also used to cover some non-heating basic electric costs when EUSP ratepayer and strategic energy investment funds are exhausted. Since the programs are increasingly fully integrated and a thorough assessment of EUSP is difficult without consideration of MEAP, I've included more MEAP details in the EUSP proposed operations plan that OHEP has historically provided, and I hope the Commission and others find this context useful in assessing program effectiveness. MEAP is entirely federally funded by the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program Block Grant, commonly referred to as LIHEAP. We administer our programs through 20 local administering agencies in the 24 jurisdictions. Administering agencies consist of governmental and nonprofit organizations. 8 of these agencies are local departments of social services. 2 are administered via local government entities, the City of Baltimore's Mayor's Office of Human Services and the City of Frederick. And the remaining 10 are administered by nonprofit community action agencies that are under contract with the department. Before discussing the fiscal year 2019 highlights and details of the proposed operations plan, I'd just like to highlight 2 significant developments that are discussed in the operations plan, which will have implications for EUSP for years to come. The first is the integration of energy assistance programs with food and cash assistance and other benefit programs through the new eligibility and enrollment platform being developed through MD Think. MD Think is an initiative to integrate a variety of public assistance program platforms. It stands for the Maryland Total Human Services Information Network. And this integration is going to have profound implications for the administration of our programs, and it's going to reduce administrative costs, make life easier for applicants, and really have a number of residual positive effects, I believe. It's going to simplify the process. It's going to help us introduce categorical eligibility to energy assistance programs. It's going to eliminate a lot of duplicative eligibility and enrollment costs that we currently incur, and generally reduce risk and cost. No longer will customers eligible for a program such as TCA, Temporary Cash Assistance, have to complete an entirely separate application, submit completely different supporting documentation, and often have to go to a completely different facility just to apply for energy assistance. OHEP has been busy building the models to reflect the changes to program administration and eligibility screening that will come from this integration. We are also finalizing a 4-month consultancy that will bring the fiscal implications for these changes into perspective. By November 15th, we will have a report detailing how much time and money will be saved, how program administration will shift to improve efficiency, and how access to programs will improve for all customers. I look forward to sharing that report in November with the Commission upon its completion. OHEP expects to fully launch the integrated effort by July 2021. So we have some time. There's a lot of work to be done in the intervening year, but this is a profound change. One outcome of MD Think integration will be increased participation rates. That's been raised by OPC. They commissioned a very thorough study from Apprise on participation rates, and there's no doubt that this integration will increase participation rates. But it leads me to the second development I would like to highlight, which is funding availability. So as the Commission is aware, at least 50% of the revenues generated through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative are dedicated to energy assistance and come to the Office of Home Energy Programs. These revenues have declined precipitously in recent years, resulting in less funding available for electric arrearages and bill payment. OHEP has taken steps over the last 2 years to fill the gap by revising the LIHEAP state plan to deploy federal funds to fill the gap as necessary. While this new flexibility should provide adequate resources to meet the full demand for bill assistance in the coming program year, the years of having surplus funds are gone, and the next operations plan submitted for 2021 will likely see reduced benefit levels to ensure funding availability for all customers who apply in fiscal year 2021. Related to this issue, and as noted in the proposed operations plan, OHEP is required to submit a report to the chairs of the legislative budget committees by December 15, 2019, on the amount of additional funding that would be required to increase program participation to 50%, 75%, or 100% of the eligible population, while providing EUSP benefits at the same level. OHEP initiated conversations this week with stakeholders regarding this report, including Office of People's Counsel, Maryland Energy Administration, and we've built the initial model for accurately projecting these amounts. The report will include information regarding the impact on the ratepayer surcharge for residential and commercial customers to reach these participation levels, and Commission staff will be consulted on that matter. So we stand at an interesting time as program innovation increases efficiency and participation rates through MD Think integration. Funding will be more limited than it has been in the recent past. OHEP will work with the OHEP Advisory Board, as we've done this year, to facilitate discussions on the ramifications of streamlined access and limited funding. These discussions, combined with the MD Think consultancy report and the participation funding report, will provide additional clarity on the direction of energy assistance in fiscal year 2021 and beyond. Just a few quick highlights from 2019. 2019 was the first year during which applications were processed throughout the entire year. Historically, we've taken a June hiatus from processing applications, which resulted in delays in getting benefits applied to accounts and just a backlog in overall processing. So this was a significantly positive development. We appreciate the coordination with our utility partners in adjusting to that change and allowing us to place 55-day holds all the time and make commitments year-round. I think this was a major positive development for our customers. Further, on expedited benefit processing, OHEP released MEAP funds 2 months earlier than it historically has as a result of an improved approach to accounting for these funds. I bring it up only because the early release of MEAP ensures that a good number of customers go into winter on service. They can have their service restored with the early release of those MEAP funds. EUSP applications for 2019 were up by 2%. And this may seem like a small increase, but I think the Commission is aware of OHEP's previously expressed concern in prior years regarding budget billing serving as a deterrent to applying for EUSP. There has historically been a gap between EUSP and MEEP application numbers, and that did close somewhat this year with the increase in EUSP applications. So I note that we trained agencies to really help explain the budget billing requirement for EUSP, and that seems to have helped somewhat. There is still a gap that exists between MEEP and EUSP applications. There are other drivers for that, but it seems to be closing somewhat, so that's a good sign. Across all programs, applications for assistance continue to remain steady, increasing or decreasing within 1 or 2 percentage points as they have for the last 5 program years. The number of applications and households receiving benefits has been relatively stable since the end of the recession. Fiscal year 2019 saw the launch of a recertification process for seniors, the disabled, and fixed income households. This allows those households without outside wages with just fixed incomes and who meet those other criteria to simply sign a 2-page piece of paper indicating that nothing has changed in their household from the prior year. It allows us to quickly expedite the processing of benefits for those households. That's approximately 20% of the households that we serve. So this recertification process is, I think, an important initiative to ensuring that some of the most vulnerable households don't have to endure an entirely new application process year in and year out when nothing has changed. So this is a major innovation in the last year. I think this year we'll really start to see the fruits of that. The other effect of that is it allows us to follow up with those customers who are a little more difficult to reach by expediting the processing for about 20% of our population. We also, in 2019, established communications with all utilities regarding the application status of and accounts receiving 55-day holds to allow for the processing of applications. So we provide information back to the utility regarding those applications that received a 55-day hold but have since been denied. This allows the utility to take the action that they need to take to address those accounts. A major change to the program this year, which doesn't come from EUSP, but it's significant, is the Gas Arrearage Retirement Assistance Program, which is funded by MEEP. That provided $5 million, nearly $5 million, to about 6,500 natural gas customers. So prior to this program, OHEP would often see customers with no electric balance because of their EUSP benefits and their arrearage retirement benefits, but they had a significant gas balance. So this allowed us to address the situations of those 6,500 households that applied this year, that received benefits this year. We see this as an important tool going forward to help avert crises in these households. Another major thing, which is a bit mundane but important, is we finally fully rewrote and published our operations manual, which really does help streamline administration and the day-to-day operations of our organization. So just looking ahead to fiscal year 2020, OHEP believes that the appropriations in the plan as submitted to the Commission for fiscal year 2020 provides adequate funding to serve household numbers projected to be between 93 and 97,000 at the same benefit levels as fiscal year 2019. There are no proposed changes to eligibility or other criteria. In 2020, we'll also be fully launching the Critical Medical Needs Program. This has been in pilot phase since 2015. I want to thank OPC, Cancer Support Foundation, and others for helping push that pilot along. This was codified in legislation signed by Governor Hogan this past year, and it really provides a streamlined point of access for those customers who have physician certifications who can't go through the typical application process themselves. So we train navigators in hospitals and cancer centers to assist with applying for energy assistance benefits, and then we streamline and turn those applications around right away. We're in the process of centralizing that through our state office so that they don't have to go to the local offices, and this will be a major benefit to that particularly vulnerable population. We continue to work to reduce denial rates. I've brought that issue up in the past as our processing times have continued to improve. We have seen an uptick in denials for missing documentation. We didn't see quite the amount of progress that I would have liked to have seen this year, but I believe that with the full utilization of that recertification process I mentioned for seniors and the disabled, as well as training on income verification tools and continued use of those tools for our local agencies that will continue to reduce denial rates. And hopefully, once we have full integration with MD Think, we expect denial rates to significantly decrease because those documents will already be available to the person processing the energy assistance benefits from other programs. Just briefly in closing, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the concerns regarding retail suppliers, since there was a good bit of activity last legislative session regarding this issue, and OPC included a significant commentary on it in their comments. It follows the ABLE Foundation and the OPC reports on the topic. We did address it at OHEP advisory board meetings, but more or less came to the conclusion that OHEP really has nothing to offer data-wise to the conversation at this point, and the conversation may be better had in a venue that's not necessarily OHEP based. We're certainly happy to participate in those conversations going forward, but we don't really have any insights into the issues related to retail suppliers. And just another brief issue on retail suppliers. We have been invited to participate on the Supplier Consolidated Billing Work Group. OHEP looks forward to participating and providing the OHEP perspective on the payment process. As the Commission is well aware, we've worked with utilities over the years to develop seamless processes for transferring tens of millions of dollars and properly applying them to customer accounts. And so we look forward to participating in that Supplier Consolidated Billing process to ensure that that seamless process continues of delivering benefits to the right households. So thank you as always for your support and your review, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman, for that review of your proposed program plan and budget. I do appreciate your hearing at the very end. You're working with the Commission on issues relating to supplier consolidated billing and the other proposals that we currently have out there. I suspect we'll hear some commentary with respect to retail supply issues from some of the other parties today, but thank you for flagging that. Is it your position, just to be clear, that the department or the office does not take a position with respect to the arguments that we'll likely hear today?
That's correct. I mean, we're more than willing to engage in the conversations regarding the practical implications of any decisions made, but we don't have any particular insights and don't take a position one way or another.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Questions for the representative? Commissioner Herman.
The term categorical eligibility, could you define that for
Absolutely.
me, please?
It's probably more easily just said automatically eligible. But categorical eligibility is the process by which we would be qualifying people for energy assistance based on their eligibility, their previously determined eligibility for another program. So currently, with regard to energy assistance, this exists in 21 states and the District of Columbia. So what we're looking at over the next 4 months is really what are the rules we're considering with regard to that. If somebody has been qualified for SNAP within the last 3 months, are they automatically eligible for energy assistance? So right now, that same person would have to go through an entirely new eligibility and enrollment process just to receive energy assistance benefits, even though they've just qualified for food or cash assistance benefits within the same department.
So I mean, I understand that, but
Yeah.
what I'm getting at is, so what you're working on is like a time limit. If somebody applied,
Right.
Over, X months ago, so that if somebody said I was eligible for SNAP 2 years ago, that's not likely to be acceptable. But there are going to be time limits and also income eligibility. The income eligibility that would match what we already have for this program. So
Correct,
we're looking
yeah.
at the other programs to see which ones maybe would work. Is that
Correct.
what's going
This
on?
consultancy is really meant to help us map all those elements out to really see what is the fiscal impact, what is the customer access impact for different decisions we can make along those lines. Certainly something like 2 years out would be well beyond the window we'd be looking at. But we've started to build some possible models for that we're going to test and put numbers to really see what are the limitations here. But ultimately, what we want to avoid is what we want to provide is that streamlined access for people who have already provided all the income information they have for another program, and we want to make sure that we can just enroll them much more quickly.
Right. Way back when, I think we called that a one-stop shop.
Right.
but that was a long time ago. So, all right, thank you very much.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Did OHAP have a position on the reporting bill that was introduced in the legislative session last, Senate Bill 716?
The reporting bill regarding retail suppliers?
Yep.
No, we did not take a
Did
position.
not take a position?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Freeman. Could you give us an update on the status of the STEP initiative?
Certainly, yeah. There essentially is no update. As I think OPC indicated in their comments, it's on indefinite hold. As you know, the STEP program was developed at a time when RGGI revenues were approximately $42 million a year. Our appropriation is now down to 19. So we've made that decision to delay that indefinitely in order to ensure that there's enough funding available for basic bill assistance and arrearages instead of launching another program that would pull from those funds. Should RGGI revenues increase back up, I think that would be the key driver in looking at STEP all over again. There are some program design elements I think we would want to revisit in that to make sure that we're focused on the most vulnerable populations. So the way STEP was designed initially, it would have been primarily serving the higher end of the income level limits. So we would want to look at some of those program design elements over again, but it's really contingent on the RGGI funds increasing and us being certain that there's enough funding available to serve the basic program elements instead of introducing a whole new program element.
Okay, so at this point, we'll just wait to see how things turn out next year then.
I would say so, yes.
Okay. Regarding the concerns that you raised in your report about the lowering enrollment in Baltimore City, I know you mentioned that you thought that Maryland Think would help to address that, at least going forward. But there isn't really any, unfortunately, there isn't a lack of low-income households in Baltimore City. So is there something else going on other than just application challenges or perhaps people moving out of the city? Is there something else happening?
To your last point, I think there are some demographic shifts. We've certainly seen an increase in applications in Baltimore County. I think the low-income population is growing there. But there's certainly no, need has not decreased to the level that's reflected in those numbers in Baltimore City. In 2015, operations for OHEP prior to my time were moved from Baltimore City Housing over to the Mayor's Office of Human Services. That resulted in a number of really completely new personnel shifts. I feel that as of right now, I lost my program coordinator at OHEP is now the Baltimore City Director. So having her there and having a team in place just starting really this past year, I think we will see a turnaround. I think they've introduced a new service delivery model completely. They are no longer concentrated on Charles Street in a single office so that everybody has to go to that single office to receive services. They are now back out in the CAP centers in the communities. I do think that with that processing in the CAP centers, with the improved staffing that they have and the budget we've been able to support them with, I think things will improve. And they certainly will improve once the technology is fully integrated. But even without that, I believe the infrastructure is there to certainly improve from where they've been in recent years.
Okay. So I did notice that you were still proposing that there be a cap of $2,000 for customers receiving arrears on the electric side. Are you still seeing a number of customers come in with arrears over $2,000?
We certainly do. We've left that at $2,000 for a long time now. We haven't necessarily. I think we've had a lot of discussions, and something I'd like to revisit with the advisory board of whether we revisit lifting that cap perhaps for certain vulnerable populations or others. I think we do risk getting into a cycle of folks just relying on that arrearage retirement assistance and just never making payments. So perhaps if we lift it, it would be going back to looking at something like the AMP, the arrearage management program that would require matching payments for anything above a certain amount. So I'm certainly willing and would be interested in looking at that. I think the $2,000 is for the most part, worked for what it is. I mean, it's 2,000 once every 7 years. Certainly, there are people who have arrearages above and beyond that. I think more frequently what happens is people bump up against the 7-year rule, right? So they got it in 2016, now they're coming back in 2019 looking for additional funds, and they can't get any more. I think we bump up against that more frequently than the 2,000 limit. So I think the arrearage numbers are something we're more than willing to look at. I think part of the problem, and I note this in the operations plan too, is that we don't have a great handle on the amount of bill payment assistance and MEAP dollars that are actually going to past due amounts. So in order to really assess the efficacy of the arrearage programs as designed, we'd really need to have a better sense of how much of our regular bill payment and MEAP is going to past due amounts. EUSP is designed to go to the utility and be split in 12 equal payments and really help that customer throughout the year. But so many of those folks come in with, arrearages that need to be addressed. There's no point in dividing those payments into 12 equal monthly payments when they're going to be off service in a month or two. So that's the data issue with that.
Okay. All right. I guess finally, the fiscal year for OHEP starts July 1. In the past, there's been challenges in some locations with a number of customers attempting to apply on the first day of eligibility. So this year, the eligibility date is July 1st. It's a Monday. Is OHEP ready to take those new customers that are showing up?
It's a great question, and the good news is that year-round processing, I think, is starting to make a dent in that problem. We're trying to get the word out. Obviously, word of mouth is the most effective way, but we've really told people that they can apply June 1 for that July period. So right now, there are 12,000 applications already in the system for the new fiscal year ready to go. So the entire point behind that year-round processing was really to avoid those lines around the corner at Drumcastle and other places, and to really get the word out that you don't need to wait until July 1 and show up. You can apply prior to that, have your application pre-screened and ready to go for July 1. But our agencies are certainly familiar with their population and ready to address, that rush happens at a few places, in particular in the city and the county. But they're ready to handle that. And I think that as we move forward and the year-round processing becomes more familiar to people, they're not going to wait until July 1. They can get that application in earlier, have it fully screened before then.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. In response to the proposed operations plan that was filed on May 31st, we received a number of responsive comments, including from Staff Counsel, Office of People's Counsel, and Ms. Peltier. Does the representative from the Office of People's Counsel wish to make any statement?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Jacob Auslander on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. For the most part, I think our comments speak for themselves. Our offices worked closely with OHEP for a number of years, and we appreciate the working relationship that we have. We think that OHEP has made a number of important improvements, including recently in eliminating that June bottleneck, so we certainly appreciate that. We support their efforts to quickly integrate with Maryland Think to hopefully streamline the processing of applications. We do note that the amounts that were earmarked for outreach this year were substantially less than in previous years. I believe this year, for this fiscal year, $80,000 has been earmarked, whereas in previous years that number has been pretty consistently at a $200,000 level. And I've told Mr. Freeman this offline, but OPC has contracted with Apprise to take the data sets that we use to create the low-income market characterization report that we released last year and turn it into an online database that will be available to the public, including state agencies, that will perhaps allow a more targeted approach to directing outreach at certain segments and certain communities that may be underrepresented in the USP participation rates. And we're more than willing to work with OHEP and other stakeholders to use those tools to see if they can be used for that purpose. We were disappointed to learn that the STEP program initiative appears to be on indefinite hiatus. We understand that it was dependent on the funding that was anticipated, and if that funding isn't there, we understand that the program can't be rolled out. But we also note that that shortfall in funding is also affecting the EUSP currently. We don't believe that the current level of funding is sufficient to meet the need, and there's a couple of reasons for that. We point out that only a fraction, for years we had said around a third of eligible households were participating. Based on updated data, we think that number has fallen below 30%. It's probably somewhere around 26%. So I think that that's a sobering view, that a program that's funded at the level that it is currently might now be serving not only less than a third, but now maybe only a quarter of eligible households. We are in stakeholder meetings with OHEP and other agencies to prepare the report to the General Assembly regarding what the what sort of dollar figures would be needed to fund the program at 20, I think it's 50%, 75%, and 100% of the eligible population at the current benefit levels. And we certainly look forward to working with OHEP on that. We made a couple of recommendations as far as ways that the Commission could ensure that the funds that are currently being used for EOSP benefits are being used in a most cost-effective manner. And I think it's important to keep in mind that what the program is really trying to do is to keep people's energy bills at an affordable level, to prevent service terminations, and in order to do that, the energy assistance that is being credited on their bills needs to be used in a way that allows them to free up other household money to pay for other goods and services. It does not further the purpose of the program if the credits do not prevent large arrearages from building up on a low-income household's energy bill. It doesn't serve the purpose of the program if large arrearages build up and lead to a service termination. So we had previously asked the Commission to direct the utilities to provide certain data that would help us evaluate whether the EUSP participants that are being served by retail suppliers are participating in significant numbers in Maryland, and if so, how much more those households are paying versus what they would pay if there was, for example, a rule that required EUSP participants to take SOS or standard service from their utility. Last year, the Commission partially granted that request, and they did direct the utilities to provide the raw numbers of customers that are participating in the EUSP program, and then the subset of those customers that are taking supply service from a retail supplier. And we compiled that information in a number of charts in the comments that we filed, and as we suspected, there is significant participation by EUSP participants in the retail supply market. In fact, in all of the reporting periods that we had data for, the EUSP customers were participating at a higher rate than residential customers as a whole in the service territories during those reporting periods. That data alone, of course, doesn't really answer the question that OPC had hoped to answer. We noted that with that data alone, we would not be able to know if perhaps low-income customers participating in the EUSP program were benefiting from taking supply from a retail supplier by paying a lower rate, perhaps, or if there was some other explanation. So, although the order did not required the utilities to provide the aggregate price data that we had asked the Commission to order them to do. We did during the advisory board meetings and then some other meetings subsequent to the advisory board meetings, attempted to ask the utilities to provide that information voluntarily. And although the utilities did participate in good faith and did provide cost estimates to OPC, only SMECO would actually agree to provide the corresponding aggregate price data for those reporting periods. And we included those numbers and a bit of analysis. And it shows what we had feared for all 4 reporting periods that we had data for. The EUSP customers were paying much more in the aggregate as a whole than they would have if they had taken service under SMECO's SOS price. Now that's SMECO's service territory, so there's no data at this point to suggest that an opposite result might happen in a different service territory. But we do think that, given what we've been able to obtain from the utilities, that it warrants the Commission taking the next step and directing the utilities to provide that aggregate pricing data, and perhaps for more than just the quarterly reporting periods that were provided to OPC over the last 6 months. And with that data, I think, depending on what it showed, the Commission could decide whether additional steps might be advisable, and that could include a work group to look at the issues more closely. I know in comments previously filed by RISA, they've mentioned that there could be benefits that are flowing to customers participating with a retail supplier that offset the additional money that they're paying in energy bills, perhaps by grocery rebates or grocery rewards. We would note that in other jurisdictions that RISA has made that argument, the commissions have not been persuaded with that argument, and they have not been persuaded with that argument because that evidence and data to support that was not provided. But trying to keep an open mind on that issue, we certainly would welcome more data and more transparency into these issues. But I think at the end of the day, to the extent that USP participation is not furthering the goals of helping out with household finances and is not helping to avoid service terminations and large arrearages that end up becoming uncollectible balances that are paid for by ratepayers as a whole, we do not think that the EUSP program is the purpose of that program is being accomplished. And so we do think that it's important for the Commission to exercise its oversight authority and to take the next step. And along the lines, a much smaller point in this year's comments, we do agree with Mr. Freeman that we also think that as part of the Commission's oversight authority, that it's important to get to a better sense as to how many bill payment assistance dollars are being consumed as a sort of mini arrearage retirement assistance payment. As a whole, it's OPC's view that the program is largely directed at providing arrearage, massive and needed arrearage assistance, but that is only available once every 7 years for households. The bill payment component was intended to make it less likely that an arrearage would exist in the first place, or at least arrearages at the size that some of them have shown to be. So, to the extent that additional data that the utilities have in their possession, could shed some light on that issue, we would join OHEP's in their request that data be provided. And with that, I'm available to take questions.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Auslander, did the Office of People's Counsel take a position? Well, first of all, let me ask you, are you familiar with Senate Bill 716? It was introduced in 2019.
I believe that I am.
Did the Office of People's Counsel take a position on that bill?
I believe that if that was the bill that would require more detailed reporting by utilities and suppliers about supply prices and related data, yes, we did support it.
Very detailed reporting bill, right?
That's correct.
And what happened to that bill?
I believe it did. I am not too involved on the legislative side, but I believe it did not get out of committee.
It didn't get out of committee, but it didn't just languish there and the session adjourned, sine die. It was affirmatively given an unfavorable report by the committee, correct?
I do not know that, but I'll take your word for you.
Subject to take
Sure.
my word for it. So why should this commission, when the General Assembly has said, we don't want this data reported to the Public Service Commission, why should this committee step into the shoes of the legislature and do it anyway?
Well, as I recall, I believe that there was a portion of the bill that did ask for EUSP-related data, but I also believe that there was a much broader category of data that was being required. And I guess when it comes to legislation that includes many subparts, I'm not sure that it is.
Yeah, but if that's true, the legislature could have excised the if it wanted to do that, could have excised the portions that they didn't find palatable, and based on your advocacy, your strong advocacy down in the legislature all the time, could have passed a bill that wasn't as expensive, right?
Presumably, they could have. I don't know the the legislative side well enough to know whether it's possible that a bill has ever been introduced and received an unfavorable ruling, but subsequently became law in future sessions. So
All right. Well, I think we have the authority to order the information, but I'm not sure that we, just because we can do something, don't mean we should do something. And the legislature has spoken on this issue recently.
Right. Well, I think that if what we were, OPC was requesting was outside of the EUSP context, that is certainly true. But the statute as it is currently written, provides the commission with oversight authority, and we went into it in a little bit more detail in our comments, but the oversight authority is not simply to review the proposed operations plan, but it's also to prepare a report to the General Assembly as far as the efficacy of the program and whether or not the funding level is adequate to meet the need.
Thank you.
Commissioner Harmon.
Mr. Ostrander, your comments seem to suggest that the funding is inadequate. Is that right?
We don't believe that the EUSP fund is at the level that it's funded at now is meeting the need for that energy assistance in Maryland. That's correct.
Okay, but you also agree that we don't have any impact on the level of funding for EUSP, do we?
Well, I don't think that you can change the maximum $37 million
Right.
that's capped by statute, but I would disagree with the idea that you don't have any role to play. I think that you have an important role, which is the role that I just explained to
Right,
Commissioner
but
O'Donnell.
what I'm getting at is the number is capped legislatively at $37 million. Isn't that right?
Subject to the recommendations that the commission makes for future increases.
Okay. The other question I have is with respect to your review of the low-income customers participating in retail competition or retail choice. Did your review consider, when you looked at the rates and you're finding that customers are potentially paying more, did you consider things like gift cards and other items that might have been appealing to the customer when they signed up?
We didn't look at the rates. We're only looking at the aggregate impact.
Well, the aggregate impact. I mean, did you add that in, that there may be other incentives for a customer to participate in retail choice?
No. The data that we were provided was not granular
Right.
enough to make that conclusion. We did mention that I think in the Able Foundation report that there was a discussion about some incentives that were promised to low-income customers that enrolled with a supplier, and there was a suggestion that the benefits were minor, and in some cases not even.
Well, but
not
I think that's somewhat, I think that concerns me, because there may be a real reason why someone chooses to take a gift card or some other incentive. They may have a very good reason for doing that now. So I don't think it's appropriate for the commission or anyone else to stand in the shoes of that customer, saying that, well, over time you may pay an extra $100, but that $200 gift card allows you to do whatever it is that you think is appropriate to do with that, and that a low-income customer has the same right to make that choice, does it not, as any other residential customer?
Well, certainly the policy currently does allow that. And while the scenario that you just mentioned might be true, there could be a scenario where the customer is not being provided adequate information.
And that's a different question. I understand that, but I mean, the fact is that we can't assume that a low-income customer doesn't understand the terms, of their contract or anything else. They may very well have made a conscious decision. And is it People's Council's position that they shouldn't be allowed to make that conscious decision?
Well, I think that if the facts showed that the scenario that you're describing is not what is happening in reality, then that the commission should consider, and I'm sure my office would advocate for restrictions on the choice. And frankly, it would not be that dissimilar to restrictions on recipients of other means-tested public benefits. I've mentioned before, restrictions on the types of food items that supplemental nutritional assistance program benefits can be used on.
Right, and those kinds of decisions are made by social service agencies, are they not, Mr. Oslander? That deal with low-income customers and their low-income
I'm not sure.
people and
The
their
decision
needs.
is made somewhere. I'm not sure if that is made at Congress or whether it's
Well,
made at the
I think
agency.
that I think I'm good, Mr. Chairman. But I just think that it's important that I agree that it's important that we make sure that customers who have the right to choose have the appropriate information and fully understand that. But at the same time, I want to make sure that customers who have made a conscious decision to choose are permitted to do so. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Linden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, Commissioner Herman beat me to it. That's fine. That's fine. But I was curious as to what the ultimate result OPC would prefer if the concerns that you raised in your comments had played themselves out to the fullest. If everything you believe to be occurring or you suspect is occurring, data demonstrates is occurring, what would you have the commission do?
Well, I thank you for your question, because I think one thing that we've endeavored to do in the context of this request is not assume what the situation is. We've always wanted to gather the data first before we would make a specific policy recommendation to the commission. But I think that the position of my office would be that if the what we calculated as a net loss in SMECO's service territory was the case throughout the service territories in Maryland and throughout the year. We only have four reporting periods, and there was no countervailing evidence that the participation can be explained by a benefit commensurate with the size of that net loss. Then I think we would recommend that the commission consider placing restrictions on participation by EUSP customers in the retail supply market. Now, of course, if that ever did happen, we would understand that would only affect retail supply contracts moving forward. We wouldn't be advocating for it to affect contracts that are already in effect. But to the extent that the EUSP program is not working for customers, even if it is just a majority of EUSP customers, then we think that it would be good public policy to make appropriate restrictions to see that the purpose of the program is being furthered.
And so this is based on the concern that the EUSP monies are paying for a commodity at a rate that's not beneficial to customers. The EUSP program is part of the deregulation statute. So we would, in a sense, you wouldn't have EUSP and the allocation of benefits that come from it if it weren't for the statute that established deregulation in the state.
That's true, but there's many ways that restructuring could have occurred, and there could have been a restriction on the way the residential market works that's different than the one that we have today. So I do agree that it did come out of that, but you know, the law could have looked different. I'm not sure that I wasn't around during the enactment of that statute, and so it's not clear to me that the EUSP program itself was proposed because there would be residential participation. In fact, I sort of understood it to be more in the type of thing that happens, for example, in mergers, where, you know, even though things might not seem like they relate to the underlying transaction between two companies, they become, you know, part of the conditions that are placed on the merging companies. So that was my sense of how the EUSP came about.
Well, I can't. I guess it's somewhat. I have to admit I was around back then, so I don't recall it quite that way. But that's not neither here nor there at this point. But I think I'll stop there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. I suspect Mr. Freeman is happy he's staying out of this point of questioning. Although, Mr. Freeman, I will ask you, we're not going to be talking about utility reporting that OPC is seeking, but in OPC's recommendations, they are asking for several additional reporting metrics from you, including how much funding, bill assistance, and MEP is being applied to past due balances, as well as more information on the timeline and rollout of MD Think. Do you have any opposition to providing that reporting?
On the first point, we don't have access to that either. We would have to work with utilities to determine the amounts applied to the past due amounts.
Okay.
Certainly on the second, I am more than happy to provide all the information, including the November report regarding integration with MD Think. That's not a problem at all.
Thank you very much.
And just one last thing on the retail supplier issue, to Commissioner Herman's point about educating customers. We have actually met with Commission staff to discuss a potential role for us to, once the website that's required regarding retail rates that the Commission will be developing, once that's up and running, we have information to disseminate that information to applicants. So we have had those initial discussions to provide the information.
Thank you. Does the representative from Staff Council wish to make any comments?
Yes, Your Honor. So, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. David Hoppock on behalf of staff. As the Chairman mentioned earlier, staff did file comments on OHEP's report on June 20th. I'm not going to go in detail and specific recommendations, but I did want to note at a high level that staff does recommend that the Commission accept OHEP's proposed allocation of costs and budget for the fiscal year 2020. And then one additional request staff has is that the Commission require OHEP to provide the Commission with a description of the circumstances under which categorical eligibility will occur and the income thresholds for the programs that may lead to categorical eligibility. I believe the ones mentioned in the report are SNAP and TANF. Regarding the data request that has had a fair amount of conversation that OPC has made, staff would note that last year the Commission specifically stated in its order, and I'm directly quoting, that the Commission will not direct the utilities to provide the total aggregate amounts those customers paid in retail supply charges and the total aggregate amount those customers would have paid for default SOS service from the utility. Staff views OPC's current request, although worded and structured a little differently, as functionally equivalent to what the commission said in last year's order. It would decline to require the utilities to report. Staff does support OPC's request that OHEP continue, or the utilities continue to provide the information on how many EUSP and MEEP customers receive service from a supplier, as well as the information that OHEP and OPC have stated is required to determine the amount of bill payment assistance that actually goes towards arrearages.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me make sure I understand what you just said.
Okay.
Are you saying you want the continuation of existing reporting? Or are you saying you want the full laundry list of reporting that OPC is requesting?
No. So we are requesting the reporting of how many EUSP and MEEP customers are retail choice customers.
Okay, well, you're not looking for the more granular data that OPC was looking for.
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that and make sure everybody understood what we were talking about here.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Freeman, what say you on Staff Council's request regarding providing that description of the circumstances that would fall into the categorical exemption bucket?
Certainly have no issue with that. That should be included in the November report that we'll be developing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Peltier, I recognize that you also filed written comments. Would you like to make any oral comments?
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, and I apologize for my very unbusinesslike outfit. I was actually at CARES, had my nice outfit, and left my shoes. So I think I understand the healthy skepticism, and I fully see the situation. I just think that there's one thing I can share. And I very much appreciate, I see lots of increased focus, the website. I've seen the 4, I believe, complaints against suppliers on sales. I live in Baltimore City, and I still work at the CARES GEDCO Energy Assistance Center every week as a volunteer. I am in a unique situation because I live what a lot of other people live. When you live in a big urban area that is heavily marketed to by third-party suppliers. And the question that I've received the most in the last 9 months from almost everybody is, I don't understand, how are people signing up for this? They're making this choice. And what I wanted to share are 2 things. Last week, I went in front of social services, and I went and spoke to the supplier there, and I've probably been on 40 sales calls now where I'm the test. And the sales call goes like this: you're going to save. You have nothing to lose. You're going to save. And the gift card is generally $10 to $15. I've never seen a $200 card, which I've heard of them. I've never seen them. They're in so many retail suppliers. They're in front of housing. They're in front of all the OHEP offices, and they're in front of social services, and they go to people's doors throughout the warmer months repeatedly. So if you live in certain zip codes, 21218, 139, Brooklyn, there's certain neighborhoods in the state, you're getting at least 4 visits during the warm months. And the sale is very similar. It's, you're going to save. And I just wanted to share that because, especially since it's e-tablets now, if somebody takes the gift card, I have never been walked through a contract summary page. And I don't see it being used, and I don't see people talking about how long the promotion is, going to variable rates. I just have to share with you, I don't see it being used the way it was intended to with RM54, which I think would let people make really good decisions. Lots of other stuff added on to that. So the reason why I also put the gas rates in there is consistently, I've looked at probably 100 more OHEP bills and 400 non-OHEP bills, and the rates are still extremely high. I would say we're running the numbers again, but this is just food for thought. Electricity is still running around 50% higher, and the natural gas rates are running pretty darn high. I just found $1.39 today, a nice OHEP gentleman that came in. So I understand who should ask for the data. I do think it's important with limited resources and hopeful increase in participation. It just seems reasonable to look at, like other states, like Illinois just passed reform last week. I believe it's going to be signed by the governor, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York. And so I very much appreciate your time and focus.
Thank you, Ms. Peltier. Are there any additional parties that wish to comment on the proposed operational plan? Mr. Wallace?
Hey, good afternoon, Your Honor, Commissioners. So RESA is here to respond to the comments that were filed by OPC last week in response to the OHEP report. The issue raised on gathering data about retail supplier pricing is one that we've seen in previous years, and it's one that concerns RESA for a number of reasons. And RESA has a little bit of a different take on the data than what OPC argued in its comments. The data shows that 70 to 90% of low-income assistance customers are currently on default service. And looking at yesterday at the Commission's shopping website for electricity, in each of the utility service territories, there are currently offers up there for long-term fixed price products below the default service price. And so that really identifies really what we think is a bigger issue, which is that these benefits could be better maximized by helping customers get this information and take advantage of those long-term fixed price offers that are available in the market. So we think that that's a better path to help address some of these concerns. I mean, it's part of a broader discussion that the data requested by OPC, we don't think that will help with that discussion. And the reason for that is that that data isn't going to show an accurate picture of what's happening or an accurate comparison between supplier pricing and utility pricing for really two primary reasons. The first reason is that the SOS price structure is an open issue in the BGE rate case, for example. One of the issues there is how to set the administrative adjustment. And I think while that issue is pending, that really goes to the core of how is the SOS price structured? Does it include all of the appropriate elements to be a proxy or a valid comparison against supplier pricing? And so until that issue is resolved, RESA's concern is that there really isn't a direct comparison between supplier prices and SOS prices that can be made. And that concern is exacerbated by the fact that looking purely at the aggregated pricing data requested, it's not going to incorporate all the benefits that a customer might receive from their supplier for the product that they enroll in. So whether it's some energy efficiency upgrades or a smart thermostat that might help them reduce their overall usage and thereby reduce their bill overall, that wouldn't be captured, or any of the other value-added products and services that I know we've talked about before and discussed last year. But there's a number of different things that would be hidden in that data, and so we don't think it represents an accurate picture, and it wouldn't provide a meaningful comparison, as OPC suggests. And then another concern is that that if the Commission's inclined to look into some of these issues and look at solutions to help maximize benefits and how shopping might be an important part of that, and we think a broader stakeholder process where interested folks have more of an opportunity to comment is appropriate. OPC's request was filed last week. In this docket, the notice, an opportunity for comment that was issued, asked for comments on the OHEP report, and we think that OPC's request sort of goes beyond that. And it was just filed a week ago, so there's lots of folks that probably would have meaningful input on this issue besides RESA that won't have an opportunity to comment on it in this proceeding. So, we would be willing to participate and offer information and insight and hopefully help drive some solutions on how best to leverage the competitive supply market to help maximize low-income assistance benefits in Maryland. But that's a broader discussion, and the concern is that the data that OPC is asking for, that it hopes will help demonstrate, and support its agenda of restricting shopping. We think that runs counter to the Maryland policy for retail choice and for benefits for all classes of customers. And so, in RISA's position, we would ask that the Commission not grant that request, and that instead, if you're inclined to look further into these issues, give stakeholders an opportunity to provide input and suggestions and work it. Thank you.
Commissioner Herman.
Mr. Wallace, we've been hearing concerns with respect to residential customers as a whole and low-income residential customers as well with respect to education and somewhat aggressive, potentially aggressive marketing. Does RISA do anything as an association to educate the suppliers, the retail suppliers that are members, and maybe some that aren't members, but to express the concerns that have been noted by OPC and by other advocates, and in order to try to address some of these concerns with potentially aggressive marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So RISA, as a trade association, it has a set of guiding principles that address some of those types of issues, and I don't have them memorized, but it talks about best practices for retail suppliers, and certainly some of those types of principles include things like helping customers understand the offer and being transparent with that, and so I think some of those guiding principles really speak to some of the concerns raised, and RISA also is involved in advocacy in markets, competitive markets across the country, and they're monitoring these issues and trying to come up with solutions, and I think one of the things that's encouraging is hearing that OHEP will be working with staff about getting information about the shopping website out to customers, because that's a great way to help customers get the information about their options. So whether it's a customer that is either not shopping, that's 70+% of customers that could be enrolling for a lower cost product in the competitive market, or if it's a customer that's already shopping, but maybe there's a better offer that they become aware of, by getting that information from OHEP or through the Commission website. I think those are really important opportunities to help get the information out there about some of the best offers in the marketplace. But back to your question, absolutely, RISA is focused on these issues and wants the competitive market to be successful, and to deliver the value that it was intended for, and that the Commission or the General Assembly contemplated in the statute, and that's what we're working on.
Thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Mr. Wallace. Following up with Commissioner Herman's questions regarding some of the marketing practices, and without commenting on the potential allegation of what type of product is being marketed, Ms. Peltier a few moments ago and OPC in their comments reflected a type of marketing that's targeted somewhat geographically in certain portions of Baltimore City. Are you familiar with that type of marketing? Are there members of, without identifying them directly, but well, let me ask it that way. Are you familiar with that type of marketing by members, by suppliers in general?
No, I'm not aware of any of the types of practices that she was discussing. I mean, and retail suppliers don't know, when they're out marketing, they don't know whether a particular customer is a low-income assistance customer or not. And there are restrictions in the statute on discrimination, and so, I think, suppliers endeavor to offer, their products, to all interested customers, and not, I'm not aware of any of, concerted effort or practice along those lines. That's not something that I've heard of, aside from the comments today.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Just, if you know, some retail suppliers in the state are very large and have a lot of customers. Some are very small, have very few customers or no customers. Of all of the retail suppliers in Maryland, on the electricity side anyway, do you know how many of them are members of RISA, roughly, ballpark?
There are about 20 members of RISA, and some of the RISA members have multiple affiliated companies, so it's probably something higher than that. But certainly, there are many companies out there that are not members of RISA. So, the RISA membership is a subset of the companies out in the marketplace.
Staff know how many retail suppliers we have on the electricity side, ballpark?
Not offhand, I'm sorry. I can get that information.
Yeah, I think it's over 100. Last I recall, it was over
I
100.
believe I checked the website, Commissioner. I thought it was 181.
Yeah, so small percentage. That doesn't necessarily connote customers, but in terms of suppliers themselves.
Yeah, and the the 20 or so, because the membership varies from time to time, so I don't have the count as today, but the 20 members would include a number of different affiliated entities. within
Sure.
RISA. So it's something higher than that, but certainly not, in the order of 180.
Yeah, well, just being a little familiar with RISA, it's represented at a pretty high level. Certainly it was at the conference that some of us just attended at Western Virginia over the last few days. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you.
Mr. Seegers, do you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I will try to be brief. Thank you very much, and good afternoon once again. As with Mr. Wallace, we are just wanted to briefly respond to the comments of OPC. We have no comments on the OHEP report. Just the request from OPC concerning the reporting requirements. Essentially, our position is the same as last year. In the sense that, as we discussed last year, the information that OPC is asking for is already available to them through what's called the PHI agency portal. Any registered agency, it allows them to access the customer information. They can go in and look at customer bills. It is on a disaggregated basis, so it would take a little bit of work on OPC's part in order to come up with the aggregated data. But they could do it, and that's something that, if they needed any guidance from us on how to do that, we could certainly provide that. The information that is in the agency portal that is limited to 12 months of the customer data. If the commission did want to, if they did direct us to provide the aggregated data, we could do it. We would just have to come up with an automated system of automated program essentially to run that kind of a search, and there would be a cost associated with that. Concerning OPC's request for how many EUSP or MEEP customers receive their supply from a retail supplier for each billing period in the past 24 months. We can provide that data as long as what OPC is asking for is what's called a snapshot in time. That is exactly the information that we provided to OPC earlier this year, where essentially we pick a date in any particular month, and we're able to pull the number of customers receiving energy assistance that have a retail supplier at that particular time. So we do have that capability. If OPC instead is asking for any customer that may have had a retail supplier at any point in a billing period, that is not something that we could very easily do. Again, we could come up with an automated way of doing it, but there would be a cost associated with that. So, but if OPC is looking for a snapshot in time, that's something that we can provide. Concerning the aggregated amount that the customers paid in the retail supply charges, as we discussed last year, the utilities do not know what the commodity charges that the suppliers charge. And excuse me, and that is because what we are given from the suppliers is what's called a bill-ready dollar amount. And that includes not only the commodity charge, but it could also include any number of things. We've heard about gift cards or any other kind of incentives that suppliers might use to get customers to sign up. the cost of those very likely are built into the rates that the suppliers would charge customers. So we don't have the ability to segment out what the commodity charge is. Moreover, if for customers that are dual billed, we don't even see the bill ready amount, so we wouldn't have that information. For the and as said before, for the if OPC is looking for the amount that was charged in the bill ready format, they have access to that on the agency portal for 12 months. It's the same thing for the total aggregate usage. OPC and OHEP, for that matter, can go in and get 12 months of that data through our agency portal. If they wanted more than 12 months, that is, once again, a search that we would have to come up for an automated system. There'd be a cost
Mr. Oslander, have you used this portal at all to harvest 12 months of data, and is it not sufficient for your purposes?
I have not, and we haven't explored it. We have discussed it before, but the way I understand it, what I would need is a list of all EOSP customers, and also, there's no statutory authority for me to necessarily go and look at somebody's electric bill. I'm not sure that we have that authority, and even if we did, I'm not sure what the People's Council's position would be on accessing it without the permission of the customers themselves.
It sounds like, Mr. Seegers, is it correct that they already have access, OPC has access, or it sounds like Mr. Oslander is not even familiar with this portal?
They do have access, Your Honor, and I would note that when customers apply for energy assistance through OHEP, there's a portion of their application that specifically says that they consent to providing access to their billing information to agencies like OHEP and OPC.
But again, I'm assuming it's one by one, and I would need to have a name, for example, to enter. Is that correct?
An account information, yes, you can have an account number.
So, I understand, PHI has brought that up before, but as a practical matter, that's not a plausible solution at this point, unless I was given the list of, 98,000 or 90,000 EOSP customers, and then even then, I think, that the People's Council would have some qualms about accessing and looking at people's bills without their permission, even if there is some language on the OHEP application saying that could be a possibility. Now, having said that, I do know that our office does have a consumer liaison that works individually with customers that call us up and ask for help, and I'm sure I have no doubts that maybe Cindy Riley in my office uses that portal or knows about that portal. But for the purposes of what we were asking for in our comments, I don't think that it's an appropriate substitute.
Sorry for interrupting. Mr. Seegers, you had one or two more items?
Just very briefly, Your Honor. On the total aggregate amount that the customers would have paid for default or SOS service, customer bills have our price to compare. So once again, that is information that is available on our agency portal. And finally, concerning the amount of energy assistance that is going toward arrearage payments, both OHEP and the Office of People's Counsel have access to customer bills on the agency portal. They can see the arrearage that is that shows up on each of the customer bills, along with the current amount due. And so they can come up with that information, Your Honor. As I said before, it may take a little work and calculation to come up with to aggregate that data, but that information is available, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Seegers.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So we will, at this point, Commissioner Linton.
And I'm wondering who I need to ask this question to, as opposed to Mr. Seegers. It's related to your agency portal, but it has to do with the Maryland Think program. And I'm wondering if agencies that don't have access to the program now, in the future, if they're able to enroll customers into EUSP, are they going to be able to access utility customer bills through the portal that you were describing? Would they even need to? So I'm not sure if it goes to OHEP or to utility company.
Yeah, I think the utility portals are incredibly useful. So whoever's doing the work would have that same access. We don't have portals for every utility. Certainly BG, Pepco. we do, and whoever's doing that work would have access, and they would need to confirm certain information through that, such as arrearage amounts and other elements. So, everybody's been gracious in extending access to those portals to those doing energy assistance work, and we assume that would be extended in the future to whoever's doing it.
So we're looking to have an expansion then of people who are accessing these portals then beyond what we have now?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so it'd be the same people who are accessing it now?
It would be a lot of the same people, and I don't think there would be any sort of major increase in the number of people who would be accessing those.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. Christia Ravenel, once again on behalf of Baltimore Gas and Electric. Is this better? Thank you. I just wanted to note we're on pretty much the same page as PHI, but just wanted to put that on the record. We have no objection to providing any ordered information that we have. To my knowledge, we also have a BGA portal with the same limitations of those 12 months that OPC can access to any disaggregate information, and then anything above that, like aggregating, is possible, but would require a cost of some sort.
Thank you, Ms. Ravenel. Okay. Seeing no additional comments, the Commission will take OHEP's May 31st proposed operational plan under advisement, as well as the 3 responsive pleadings from staff, OPC, and Ms. Peltier, in addition to all the testimony that we've received today, subject to a written order that will be issued by this Commission in the near future. This meeting is adjourned.